In this video, we're going to be talking about if-else statements. Now, in the previous video, we talked about if conditionals and how they work. However, the if conditional can actually be extended with an else statement. So let's see how that works. Okay, so we learned in the previous video that in JavaScript, in order to add dynamic logic and behavior to your code, you use the if conditional. And inside the if conditional, you define a condition. And if the condition is true, only then the code inside the if block will be executed. Otherwise, it won't run. However, this is very limited. For example, in some cases, we might want to run another set of code if the condition is false. And we can do that by pairing an if statement with an else statement. Let's see how that works. So first, we start off with a simple if statement. In this case, the condition is if 2 is bigger than 16.4. Now we know that 2 is not bigger than 16.4, so this will return false, and the code inside the if block will actually not run. But let's go with it. So if 2 is bigger than 16.4, then we will log to the console the string 2 is bigger than 16.4. So console.log 2 is bigger than 16.4. Now instead of just ending the block right there, we can actually extend this if conditional with an else statement. So we type in the ending pair of curly braces, and then we type in else and then start another block. So instead of just ending the if statement, we extend it with an else block. So we type in else and then another pair of curly braces. And here we can define the code that we want to run if the condition is false. And in this case, if the condition is false, we'll run some other code. And that is, we will log to the console 2 is not bigger than 16.4. So console.log 2 is not bigger than 16.4. And then we end the else statement with the ending curly brace. And this is a complete if-else conditional block. So what does this code do? Well, if we run this code, we'll see that it logs to the console 2 is not bigger than 16.4. And that is what should happen, because the condition inside the if block is false. So 2 is bigger than 16.4, that's not true. It will return false, because 2 is not bigger than 16.4. And because the condition returns false, the first bit of code won't be executed. So the code inside the if block will not be executed. But the code inside the else block will be executed, because the else block only gets executed if the condition is false. So if the if block doesn't get executed, you can define some other default code to execute inside the else block. So you can almost read this code as if 2 is bigger than 16.4, then log to the console 2 is bigger than 16.4. Else log to the console 2 is not bigger than 16.4. It's very intuitive and easy to understand. And because the condition 2 is greater than 16.4 is false, the else block ran and we got logged to the console 2 is not bigger than 16.4. And that's how an if-else conditional works. Now let's see some more examples. So first we'll start with a variable, var n, which equal the number 1. So variable n equals 1. And now we'll define the if block. So if n is strictly equal to 53.8, then we will log to the console n is 53.8. Else, if that's not true, then we will log to the console n is something else. And then we end the code block. And the result is we get the string logged n is something else to the console. So how does this work? Well, variable n is actually equal to 1 because we've assigned the value 1 to variable n. Then we're defining the if block. Inside the if block, we're saying that n is strictly equal to 53.8. We're using the triple equal sign, which means strictly equal, which means the value must be the same and the data type must be the same as well. So although the data type is the same in this case, both are numbers, but the values are different. N is 1, and the other side we have 53.8. So the condition in this case returns false, and that's why the code inside the if block doesn't run. However, the code inside the else block will run because the code inside the else block runs if the condition is false. In this case, the code console.log n is something else is what actually gets executed, and we get that logged to the console. However, if n was equal to 53.8, what would happen then? Well, then the if condition would return true, and if the condition is true, then the else block won't actually get executed. So it's either the if block or the else block. Both of them doesn't get executed at once. If the condition is true, the if block gets executed, otherwise it's the else block. And that's how conditionals work. Okay, so let's see some more examples. In this case, we'll have a variable called n, which equals an array with items 1 and 2. So n equals the array 1 and 2. So now we'll define the if block, and inside the if block, the condition will be n.includes 3. Now, if you remember from the previous videos and also the array module, the includes method is available to arrays that lets you check whether a value is actually present inside an array or not. So in this case, n.includes 3 will tell us whether the value 3 is present inside the n array or not. If it's present and is actually included inside the array, then the includes method will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. So if the value 3 is actually present inside the n array, then we're defining n.splice, n.index of 3, 1. Basically, we're finding the index of the value 3, and then we're removing it from the array using the splice method. So n.splice, the index of 3 and 1, which means we're removing one element, which is the index of the value 3. That's how we're removing the array item with the value 3 if it's present inside the array. But if it's not present, if the condition is false, then we were adding the value 3 into the array. So n.push 3. And then we're ending the conditional statement and the else block. And the result of n after the code is executed, as you can see, the n array now contains 1, 2, and 3. So we have 3 values, 1, 2, and 3. So how does this work? Well, first we define the variable n, which contains an array 1 and 2. So the array only has the values 1 and 2. And then we're defining the if condition. And the condition is n.includes 3. And this condition will return true if the value is actually present inside the array. But in this case, the n array only contains the values 1 and 2. 3 is not present. So n.includes 3 returns false, and the if block is not executed. But the else block is, and inside the else block, we do n.push 3. So we push the value 3 at the very end of the array. That's why now the n array contains the values 1, 2, and 3, because we added the value 3 at the end of the array using n.push inside the else block. However, if from the very start the n array contained 1, 2, and 3, what would happen then? Well, then n.includes 3 would return true, because 3 would indeed be included inside the n array. And that's why the code inside the if block will get executed. And inside the if block, we find the index of the element with the value 3, and then we splice it, meaning we remove it from the array. So if the array initially contained 1, 2, and 3, then after this code ran, the array would only contain the values 1 and 2. So this code ensures if the value 3 is present in the n array, then it's removed. Otherwise, if the value is not present, the value 3 is actually pushed inside the array. And that's how we can use if and else conditionals to accomplish these tasks. Let's take a look at a fun example. So in this case, we'll define a variable date, which equals a new date object. So as we've learned from the dates module, new date creates a new date object which contains the time when the code was executed. So in this case, the variable named date contains a new date object. Then we're defining another variable day, which equals date.getDay. So as we know again from the dates module, the getDay method will give us the day of a date object ranging from 0 to 6. So 0 means Sunday and 6 means Saturday. So in this case, date.getDay method will give us a number from 0 to 6 that will tell us what day of the week it is. And that will be contained within the variable named day. And now we're defining our conditional. And the conditional is if day is strictly equal to the number 0 or day is strictly equal to 6, then we'll run some code. So basically, this condition will return true if either day is 0 or if day is 6. Only one of them needs to be true, not both. because we're binding these two conditionals with a logical OR operator. So in this case, if day is 0 or if it's Sunday, or if day is 6, which is Saturday, then we'll run some code, which is we'll log to the console, it's the weekends. So console.log, it's the weekends. Else, meaning if the day is not 0 and the day is not 6, then we'll log to the console, weekends are in 6 minus day, days. So 6 minus day will tell us how many days are left until the weekends. And the value of that will be concatenated within the two strings in order to make weekends are in X number of days. And now we end the conditional. So how will this work? Actually, the output of this code will be different depending on the day it is executed. So in this case, let's assume that today is Tuesday. So var date equals new date. So the new date object will contain the current timestamp, which is Tuesday. And date.getDay would give us 2 because 2 is Tuesday. 0 is Sunday, 1 is Monday, and 2 is Tuesday. So if it's Tuesday, date.getDay would give us the number 2, and var day would equal 2. Then in the conditional, day is strictly equal to 0 or day is strictly equal to 6. Neither will be true because day equals 2. So day is strictly equals 0 will be false, and day is strictly equal to 6 will be false as well, which means the whole condition would return false, and the if block won't be executed. So the else block will, and inside the else block, we will say weekends are in 6 minus day. So 6 minus day, we know the day in this case contains 2, so 6 minus day means 4. And when the value 4 will be concatenated with the strings, the final output will be weekends are in 4 days. So in this case, depending on the day, we would either get weekends are in an X number of days, or if it is with a weekend, so if it's Saturday or Sunday, meaning if the day is equal to 0 or it's equal to 6, then we'll get logged it's the weekends. And that's how this code will work. Okay, so now let's revisit the discount campaign we built for an e-commerce store in the previous video. So in that video, we had a variable order total which contained the total value of the order. So in this case, we'll have the variable again, variable order total, and we'll set the value 19. So $19 is the total value of this order. Then we'll define the if conditional. So if order total is equal to or greater than 50, just like in the previous video, then order total minus equals 10, which means 10 will be minus from the order total and the new value will be assigned to the order total variable. And we'll log to the console, yay, you received a discount. This is what will be logged if the condition is true. But we can have an else clause and define what we'll do if the condition is not true. So in this case, we will log to the console, sorry, no discounts available. And then we'll end the else block. And now, when this code is executed, we get the string, sorry, no discounts available, logged to the console. So how does this work? So first, we have a variable named order total with the value 19. And then we define the condition in the if block. And the condition is that the order total variable must be greater than or equal to 50. And in this case, it's not greater than or equal to 50, it's 19. 19 is smaller than 50. It's not greater than 50, and it's definitely not 50 itself. So the condition inside the if block will return false, which means all the code in the if block won't be executed, and we'll skip to the else block. And the code inside the else block, which is sorry no discounts available, logged to the console, this is what will be executed, and that's why we get the message logged to the console. And that's how we can use the else block to define a fallback measure if the condition is not true.